Hey everyone, Dr. Nell here. It was such a pleasure and an honor and a privilege always to be in the company of leaders in any state, but especially my home state. It's the day after I met you at the same conference, and because I am who I am, I want to share the information that I truly set out to share with you and bring it back into coherence for you, because I believe great leaders build great leaders. And I know that if we are going to build a stronger future and a more literate future in Montana, we have to know the way, go the way, and show the way. And to do that, you have to know a lot about what it takes to teach children to read, what the systems are that they need, what our teachers need to know, what the curricular resources need to be. It's a lot. It's complex. And that's why in the United States of America, we are at 60% proficient. It's not like this is just a Montana problem. That is why policy is coming into play this fall in Montana. That is why I am here to passionately encourage you to just get more comfortable with trusting that your voice matters in this work. And I'm going to share the talk that I wanted to finish for you because I also believe that matters. And I want you to have the information that I set out to bring to coherence for you. So here we go. So remember, the title was Becoming a Literacy Leader and What It Takes to Implement the Science of Reading. And I grounded in the idea that we're going to have policy coming into Montana, and that this is truly a visual metaphor, that there is a big summit that we can climb, and it is reaching and teaching all children to read in Montana. And I know that within your schools, you have your own summits to climb, and reading is that foundation. Being literate, having language is the foundation to all academic success. Truly, the evidence is very clear on that. Having great language skills promotes great social emotional learning and all other academic success starting at 3 years of age. So I want you to go out with whatever cost of trouble to climb this mountain, because 90% is reachable. We can reach that goal of proficiency for at minimum 90%. And then I went out to give you, well, the what if. Think of the possibility if you as a leader were supported by policy that helped you fund some of those really complex situations that you're up against as a leader. What if you had teachers that had the knowledge that they needed to teach all children to read? This is an epidemic in the United States. There are very clear reports out of the state of our universities and what they're teaching and what they know. And we know that there are states that have gone before us, so why not learn from them and what they've done and how their teachers are truly able to effectuate change the minute they step into a classroom in reading. I can't say that for a majority of universities, specifically in Montana. I actually hang out in university classrooms and talk to college students, and I actually really interview a lot of student teachers about what they know and what they've been taught about what they need to know when they walk into reading classrooms. So we want to get clear in policy about how we can help create the pipeline that helps you have teachers who have the right information. Number two, I said, well, what if we ensured all educators and leaders had coaches, because coaches make us all better? Then what if that was put into policy? What if we had regional centers that always helped us, and it wasn't always this huge cost to us, or that it was created in a policy way that the state and our local autonomy, the way it was funded and the way it was supported, would be taken care of. And then I went into assessment protocols, because great assessment protocols help us find the risk our students have. It's not what changes lives. Instruction changes lives, and that's number 4. We need to have great materials along with great teacher knowledge, and those are not easy things to come by in American public education. So what if we made sure they were in your schools through policy? And lastly, how about you have the financial resources to match your base rate of need? What if you have a lot of risk, regardless if you've had a lot of poverty, if Title I, a lot of foster children, transient children, whatever it is that you have in your schools? What we really would we have to know all of those levers for change so we can more able support you through the funding matrix to get you what you need. I really think that great policy accounts for this, because every school has different needs. Every school needs different ways to support their community. The next thing I went into was to really remind you that policy can help you have a framework. It's the floor, the baseline. It's not the ceiling. It's not the sun, moon, or the stars, but it will help you have the funding tool to walk down that pathway. Remember that visual metaphor, to get to the summit of literacy for all children. Now, part 2, I talked about briefly, knowledge outpaces curriculum resources any day, every time, if you've equipped your educators, if you've equipped yourself. So are you equipped to lead this literacy transformation? Do you know how to close a literacy gap? It's big, and it's not your fault. It's a systemic, overarching national crisis. And I always say, we don't have a literacy crisis, we have a leadership crisis. So really knowing that educating and equipping yourself and equipping your educators is probably your number one lever for change. And that is inclusive of making sure you have coaches, right? Then I said a great literacy leader, it means that you not only understand what it takes to reach and teach reading, what it takes to teach reading, but it means you understand what it takes to create and sustain the systems. You have to be leading, building the systems, having the knowledge, getting the coaching. It's all a cogged wheel system. And then allocate the resources to get it done, okay? You can't assume that somebody over there who's a leader of literacy, the interventionist, just knows how to get it done. Don't make it that person's job. We have to lead it together. We have to know the way and go the way and show the way. You have to become more deeply understand why you are not, why our children are not reading. And if you understand that, you'll be able to help all the teachers bring literacy to all children, so we can change now and today for a better future tomorrow. So I always love the quote, remember, good habits cost us now and bad habits cost us later. Good habits, like if 72% of teachers are using teaching practices that have been debunked in science, currently 72% of them are using practices. Remember, this is about that de-implementation process. So good habits, when you change practice, are painful for people. That's why it costs you. It costs you emotionally, lots of dialogue and building culture and moving towards new implementation is hard. But if you don't do it, bad habits cost you later. That will be the literacy outcomes for your students will be, they won't be increasing, they'll be decreasing if you don't do those changes. So I gave you these 2 free resources. I said, go look at Cox Campus. It is an online free science of reading teacher knowledge building platform. You may be getting training in letters, top 10 tools, keys to literacy, AIM Institute. They're all amazing, CIRI approved, paid for platforms. They're wonderful. I was a national letters trainer who helped transform Mississippi from the 50th nation to the 23rd. So I know the power of knowledge and what it means to get it, but we do need equitable access. And that's where Cox Campus comes in. It's funded by a family foundation. And then we have the Reading Universe, which is slowly getting up to speed. So look at both of those. They will help you get the knowledge you need if you can't afford to have someone come in and provide the training. So my last 2 parts of this talk, 3, what leader moves will effectuate change in literacy outcomes. So now, if I were moving into this school year and I really wanted to understand a leader move, one thing I didn't put in here is make sure you tool up your knowledge about what it takes to learn to read. That's one of your greatest leader moves. But the greatest behind your knowledge and your competency is your understanding of the systems that drive the work. So we always rise to the level of our system, and we fall, we rise to the level of our goals only when our systems are functioning. So this quote by James Clear, it says, we do not rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. And so if you don't have a great multi-tiered system of support in place, that you deeply understand that your core instruction, that tier instruction that all children get, meets the needs of 80% of your students. So when they get this 90 to 120 minute block of English language arts, you have 80% of your students' needs met, your MTSS system isn't working. Your tier 1 instruction should knock it out of the park. So that is one of the things that I really want you to hear. Tier 1 instruction should knock it out of the park. And if you get your tier 1 so dialed in, you should get to 80% proficient in that tier 1. You're always going to have students who are at risk, who always need more intensification. That's normal sample. That's typical. So what I am offering you is the idea that MTSS is a framework that allows you to deliver evidence-based practices. So get it right in tier 1, deliver the evidence-based practices and intensify them in tier 2 and in tier 3. That doesn't mean new curriculums, new teachers. That's a whole nother dialogue. I do a lot of MTSS training, but what you do need to understand is that you've got to dial into MTSS. So if you want to make a great leader move right now, and there are trainings from OPI or other tools out there, like even I know there are other national training groups that do MTSS trainings. I do some, but get yourself tooled up in MTSS and understand that it is the framework that will allow you to build in the science of reading work. Because science of reading also notes that you have great tier 1 instruction, then children get intensified tier 2 and even more intensified tier 3. Now, no MTSS system can be done without great assessment systems that are valid and reliable, and they help our teachers dynamically teach to respond to the student need. So if you don't have an assessment protocol that is valid and reliable, it's not going to help you deliver on the promise that the science has taught us about. And then, of course, tier 1 instructional protocols. So what I did is I gave a handout around tier 1 models. And I want you to really dig into potential tier 1 models that can help you deliver on the promise. So when you dial in your system around MTSS, it is the one system that integrates all that we do and that we need to do, and it will define the work. It is a system framework for all school improvement. So for behavior, for all academics, for social, emotional, all of it. It is the framework that helps you do core universal instruction, and then the dialoguing in your PLC process and your MTSS systems check on progress monitoring if students are making adequate growth and responding to instruction, right, RTI, and what they're going to need. That happens across all domains. It's really, MTSS is always about prevention. We're not going to wait and fail kids. In some of the greatest systems, right now, Livingston is one of my keeping the light on, really doing some great work. We got rid of the discrepancy model in K3 reading. We no longer wait for a child to fail to show that their IQ and their Woodcock-Johnson or their WIS scores in reading are discrepant. We actually look at what their response rate is in the MTSS model to great instruction. It's great instruction that finds students with difficulties. It is not a big, bad standardized test when they're in 3rd grade. Great instruction shows us if they're responding. And if they're not responding in a typical pattern that's like most other children, then something might be wrong. So we apply intensified instruction, small group instruction, change of instruction, more direct instruction. And if there's still persistently slow response, then we know they might be that student who needs the civil rights protection of an IEP. That is what MTSS teaches us. We don't wait to fail children. And that's what this diamond model, I love this model because it's kind of representative of the bell curve. You see, most children are in the middle. We have those who need enrichment and those who need intensification. But classroom teachers and core instruction are responsible for all of them. That's what the yellow line stands for across the middle. So those on the left, tier 3, tier 2, are intensification and intervention. Those on the right are acceleration and enrichment. Sorry about that little pause. A hailstorm hit Bozeman. So back to this what we call the multi-tiered system of support diamond. It looks a little bit different than the triangle, right? Because it's representative of that bell curve. And We're moving students into core instruction, and those meaning that they're scaffolded up into, buoyed into grade level content that they are access to help them access all content through tier 2 and tier 3. And if they are more advanced and they've mastered core content at grade level, then we enrich and extend, right? And so you can see, I like the words at the bottom. Sometimes you're in older grade levels, you're remediating. Younger children, you can normalize them typically. Up to 95% of students who end up in intervention can be normalized with the right intensive support starting very early in their lives. So how do you do this? How do you know who's at risk? You have to have great assessments protocols in systems. So get it dialed in. Get your systems dialed in around assessment. Get your systems dialed in around MTSS. How do you design MTSS? What are your times in instruction? What is your tier 1 doing? How do we know what students need? And that's where assessments come in. So in tier 1 instruction, for me, I don't just blanket treatment, say all kids just get a core curriculum. I say, well, I'm going to universally screen my students and understand exactly where they're at. So how much risk do I have? And then understand if the tool I'm using is going to meet their needs. This is really speaking to pre-K through 2, okay, really. But 3rd through 12th grade, we use assessments in variously different ways. So in this way, all kids get universal screeners. That's K-12, pre-K-12, okay? And what universal screeners do is that they help us understand where our risks are. And I've laid out that I believe that we have to have universal screeners in word reading, which is your top one, early literacy, and then what would be literacy later on. And then also language, oral language early on, and then oral written language later on. And that also, our unit and our state interim assessments are also what we call formal universal screeners. And then I go on to say that once we give a screener and we find risk, we have things called diagnostics. These are not what standardized diagnostics. They are diagnostics to help us diagnose exactly what to teach in the moment, where we could use formative assessment to find exactly what to teach in the moment. We have to understand what our students know and do not know in that diagnostic protocol. And that could be in phonics, phonology. We do them in oral language as well. They're not as easy to find in oral language, but sometimes in the schools I'm serving, we do up to 100% of our students in diagnostic survey, where we're really looking to see what their skills are. So for example, I had 37 students in a 1st grade classroom in a bottom 5 school of Georgia, where they didn't know their alphabet. So was I going to start them in open court at a long vowel pattern, or was I actually going to teach them about the alphabet that they didn't know? My base population demanded that I change what tier 1 instruction those students got. So that's what these next charts talk about. Well, this is the final screening protocols that we use when our students are struggling and not responding to instruction. And we need to understand more to understand maybe if there is a retrieval problem, if there's a deeper level problem, so I can provide the right intervention before I consider a qualification. And you know, in my Livingston model, what I love most about it is our school psychologists know all of the information by the time we've done 3 or 4 rounds of intervention in preschool. Let's say early learning in Montana. We cannot use the word preschool. Early learning in Montana. Through that 2nd grade, we don't really have to do a lot of assessment to prove they need that protection of an IEP, because we've done it all through the process of MTSS. Powerful. Now this data should define how you teach your students. So like if 15% of your students have dyslexia, another 50% need direct, explicit, systematic instruction, and only 40% kind of get it in spite of what teachers you have in those classrooms, you have about 65% of your students that need you to be very clear about what they get in tier 1 instruction. So a great leader move right now as you move into the fall is, do you really know that 65% and exactly what they need through diagnostic protocol? Because these students are all in a normative sample. They all exist on that continuum. We have well below poor, not proficient readers, and very good readers who are highly proficient. And they all occur in every classroom. and you will have more students who are struggling, or what I like to call curriculum casualties or dysteachia in classrooms. If your curriculum is off, or your instruction and the knowledge happening with the teacher around how to teach struggling readers is not at the level that they need. So we have to equip our teachers with the resources and the knowledge and the time and the assessment protocols to understand if they are effectuating change, okay? And in this, our dyslexics are always right here in that continuum. So with that being said, one of another great leader moves as you move into the fall is to understand there are always 4 types of readers in your classrooms. Not just that 65% of them will need very clear, explicit, systematic instruction, but that there are 4 types of readers in your classrooms. And that varies on their word reading skill and on their language skills. Now, this is powerful. So once you understand that a student who comes in with very poor oral language skills and goes on to have also very poor word reading skills, that is what we call that garden variety reading difficulty. I cannot read words, and I do not understand what the words are, but I also did not understand language before I could not read words. Very important. So why not start screening language early so we can know if they actually know that language that they're going to have to understand when they read that language, right? So powerful that we have that is this down bottom left quadrant. Then we have the student who just doesn't learn to read words very well. They're very poor in word reading and very good in language. That's this common profile of a dyslexic. However, most dyslexic have a lot more going on. And it's hard to find dyslexics in environments where children have been deprived of language, but they exist in every population. So then we have those who are good at both. Those are your typical good readers, and those who can read words, but they don't have language. This is a very small percentage of students. And when we look at research, that scatter plot definitely hinges on these 3 subtypes. We have more of those, and there's a scatter plot that you would actually see in a typical data set in any classroom. And this is by Katz and Hogan in 2003. Both of these researchers, I am so grateful to know, and they're speaking just next week in Montana, is that we really know a lot about subtypes of readers. And you as leaders, when you guide meetings around MTSS and at PLC meeting, this isn't about standards. This is about, do you actually know what their language skills are? Do you actually know what their word reading skills are? And those are linguistic variables that we have to understand. Phonemic awareness, their acquisition of the phonics system, their orthographic mapping skills. Those are words that we would go deep into to understand how we talk about our developing reading brain. Okay, so leaders know that these subtypes exist in every classroom. 65% of children really need you to get it right and understand that they need you to understand what kind of difficulties they have. And then you design your system around who your students are. I noticed I left EMLSS at the top of this one. That's a Wisconsin term, equitable multi-leveled system of support. To us, MTSS. So what should be happening at all tiers? And this gives you kind of a breakdown for the tiered support. I'm not going to go into it. I think if there's one thing most people know about tiered instruction and understand that this is the greatest thing you could do in tier 1 is prevent reading difficulty. So get your tier 1 dialed in, get your standard operating procedures in tier 1 so good that you don't have a lot of problems after they leave tier 1. And then to do that well, I sent you this document. This is a document I created in June after working with 120 leaders in Wisconsin that really taught me that we needed to define out what was needed for the populations you serve. So sometimes you need to do what's called a flooding model in your homeroom, where the teacher has so much need in the room. When we do screener and then we do diagnostic, we go, whoa, we have like 5 or 7 groups of different types of kids in this room, meaning not the 4 types of reading difficulties, but there's 7 different groups based on if they know the alphabet, if they know their short vowels, if they are beginning readers, if they're multisyllabic readers, they have vowel teams. If you had those 5 groups in one classroom, teaching them the magic E pattern when this group didn't know their alphabet and this group was doing their short vowels and then this group was over here CVC, they're the one group that will advance into the the long vowel pattern pretty easily. Then these guys were vowel team, and this group was multisyllabic vowel team, and short vowels, they're super advanced. They're going to be bored by the long E. So the long E, is it really meeting, long magic E pattern, is it meeting all the needs of the 5 groups? No, it's not. So in this flood model, flood and all groups go into small group. Flood means we put as many adults into a room and we teach the groups for what they need in foundational skills in K2 classrooms. So I really teach what is needed in K2 classrooms at the skill that they need it at. And now I've worked in several schools where we use this. We use a model, the flood model and the walk to read model. The first 2 columns are very similar, except in walk to read, the children leave and go into different groupings versus all the adults coming into the room and being taught in their group. So there's no whole group instruction in the first 2 columns because I have too much variance in my need in my classrooms in K1 and 2. And if I'm going to close a gap, I have to ask a teacher to teach 5 to 7 different skill levels that are so different that it's only going to happen in a tiny little small group rotation that the teacher only has about 10 minutes. And then I'm going to ask that child to sit at a desk and do student managed work. The research is very clear. Students who are struggling the most need teacher managed instruction time the most. They need very little seat work time in the beginning, but then child managed seat work time increases as the year goes on because the teachers build confidence and competence in their knowing how to read. The more they know, the more they do, the more they do, the more they have. It's the Matthew effect. The rich get richer. So then once they become richer at that skill, then they build skill and they can do more child managed seat work. But in the beginning, they need lots of teacher managed time and direct instruction with children. Now, some children in a whole group setting in the 7 different groups don't need a lot of teacher focused time. In fact, they need 10 minutes of teacher focused time. So we have to get very real. Evidence is very clear. Not all children need a 30-minute whole group lesson in one skill. That's not what they need. But what they do need is diagnostic prescriptive. It's very prescriptive instruction from the get-go. If you're going to close your gaps in tier 1 and have excellent tier 1 instruction, especially if you're in a school that has massive variation, then you have to choose a flooded model or a walk to read model. And that's going to require you to build a staggered schedule so you can have different grade levels teaching reading at different times so you can flood adults. The final model is a very common model that you know. It's the whole group. We teach this skill and then they go off and they get a tiny little small group. And then they're going to get win time, what I need, or go to grow, or tier 2 intervention, whatever you call it. I'm a believer that you hit it where they need it right away and you intensify across that time. But their language, their comprehension, and their oral language, their discussion is always at grade level, always building vocabulary at grade level. But this model, if you truly understand MTSS, you are building students from where they're at. You're not just choosing, oh, I teach this lesson because it's the first lesson in the curriculum. No, I say, who are my students? What do they need? How will I design instruction and the framework for the MTSS model for my student population, right? Much different approach. So thoughtful implementation is the key to success. If you really get thoughtful about those things, you will change the future of your reading statistics. And of course, it's going to take a lot of knowledge building. That's why you're going to look at the free resources on Cox Campus or the Reading Universe. You have to have knowledge and you have to have the right tools to really dial in and get it right. But I gave you the assessment matrix. I gave you the instructional model matrix. You have a lot of information. You can always call me too. Because if you don't get implementation right, you could get 14% of your school's classrooms or your schools in 17 years. And like I said, who's going to be around in 17 years? I don't want you to wait that long. Your students don't have that kind of time. We want expert implementation. Takes a team of focused individuals who know this content so you can make it 80% of your classrooms or 80% of your schools in 3 years. It will make a difference. This is the NERN work, a National Implementation of Research Network. So what this says is that effective interventions times effective implementation in their enabling context gives us significant outcomes. We can put some numbers to that. 80% times 50% times 60 gives us a whopping 24%. So if you do not have effective implementation and you're only basically going half speed at it, I always tell a leader, one of my leaders that I really work closely with is named Patty Durgan, and Ann Cox and Ann Pencox and Livingston. I can name many others, but there specifically, we say we got to keep our foot on the gas. There is no taking the foot on the off the gas, because there is like no time if you're urgent in young children's lives. You need to get clear that is when the gap can close. I could show you images of brains when we truly focus on birth to 8. Their brains are so malleable then. It changes significantly after between 5 and 8. So get them while they're young and get effective implementation in place. But your MTSS, your knowledge and your coaching and your systems have to be working for you to get those significant outcomes. So it's time to not be defined by your past or what you knew before you heard this talk or what you thought about reading policy and how somebody else could do that. It's time to really shape your new current your future, okay? It's time to be inspired. Be inspired. You should, because we have great opportunity in this state. You can be that leader who innovates. You can be that leader who helps add to the dialogue about what you need to help serve the community you serve. You can create change through policy. You can have that change be very inclusive of all of Montana schools, but also all of the students in your classroom, because all children need great instruction. It changes their lives. And now that inclusivity is for your schools, your communities, your teachers, your learners. And the sciences of reading, teaching, and learning can meet all the needs if they're integrated and understood and we implement them appropriately. Now, implementation is the stickiest part, but I know you can do it if you keep learning, because you can know the way, to go the way, to show the way. You can know that summit is out there because others have reached it before you. So 90% is possible. The pathway is very clear. There's so much evidence. There are schools like you who've done it before you and will do it after you, okay? So we need to lead the way with knowledge and courage. So if you need a cheerleader sometime, just call me up. I'm here for you. I really want you to be courageous as you try to help Montana shape a future with really creating policy that can help you lead this work better. And you can help yourselves right now by really dialing into your systems. Because yesterday I mentioned your expectation oftentimes is this, that you'll go from, we'll do this intentionally in one meeting and then we'll just have success. It's really a bumpy path. We're human beings and we like to do things the way we've always done them. And so we might learn something now, but then we fall back into habit as soon as the enabling context around us supports our old behavior. So you've got to de-implement and change to get a new future. You can't get a new future without a new current reality and new expectation. And the scariest place you're ever going to be is the same place as last year, unless you reach 90 to 95%. And if you did, then you keep trucking on where you're at. But if you didn't, I don't want you to be where you were last year. You can keep getting better, keep your foot on the gas. So these are my disclosures. I always like to let people know what I'm involved in and how I get paid and what companies I've worked with. So that's what that's all about. Now, thank you. Thank you for coming back to this video. I really do care about you, and I really care that we make a big difference together through the Reading League Montana, through the group that I have created, the Transformative Reading Teacher Group, and also the Big Sky Literacy Summit. I would love it if you were online virtual on August 1st, because John Maxwell will be in person in Montana, and he is considered the greatest of all time leadership trainer, and you are leaders. He will help you lead better. If you do not know John, he's written 90 books. He's 76. His wisdom is deep, and he's truly filled with great, great words for all of us to learn from. So come join us virtually if you if you can, we would love to have you, or come in person. We have real seats if you're in Montana and it's in Big Sky. So thank you again for spending this time with me. Text me, write me. I would love to hear from you. Really grateful for this moment.